Hello everyone and welcome to the fourth part of this tutorial series. So it has been half a year since the last video, but that doesn't really matter. Matter of fact is we're back with part 4 of the timing tutorial series, and this time this will be the last part of this 4-part series. So in this tutorial what I'll be doing is I will be adding a corner cutting system to the timing system, and I will add a lap counter as well. So let's start with the lap count first, which would be more logic to me. Before I move on any further, could the chat let me know if the audio quality is good, if you can hear me properly. And meanwhile, let's get started with this tutorial. So first of all, where did we leave last time? Where did we leave things at? So last time we made a full-fledged tutorial system, not tutorial system, a timing system, where you can basically do a lap like I'm doing here. So I'm going to run around the track quickly to get a quick, nice lap time in. And there we go, we set a lap time of a 10.467, and the board also registers our lap time. So that is what we've done so far, pretty much. And now what we will do is add a lap counter and add a corner cutting system, so that you can't just cut across the track like I just did with my character. So starting off with the lap count system, so what I first need to do is, I would say, expand the existing system here. If you remember from the previous video, we made this data structure thing where where this table would contain basically data of every player who's in the game. It would display their last time, the best time. Actually, looking at this, we changed it to a different system. I'm actually not sure anymore what system we use. Let me check the script quickly. No, we have been doing this kind of system where it would display our last time and best time. So we are going to get started with the lap counter. So what I want to do is I want to expand this thing here, this structure, if you remember from last time, so it contains a lap count. So to do that, I need to go to the spot where it creates a data structure, which is right here. So what happened here was when a player first joins the game, it creates kind of a table for that player. It creates data for that player, and now we want to expand that a little bit so it includes a lap counter as well, like so. Then what we need to do is make sure that our lap counter updates every time a lap is set, and this fortunately can be done quite easily. We can go over here to the set lap time function, which it gets triggered every time someone sets a lap time. That happens, let me look up the place where that did. Yeah, stop timer. So this bit here is on the local side of things. This is the part of the script that keeps track of your time. And so when you cross the line, it stops the timer, and then it sends a signal to the server, letting the server side know, aka this script, that a lap time has been set, which is this trigger here, and that will trigger this function, which should handle the server side of thing, which should register your lap time and publish it to the server effectively. So this is a very simple thing, what we need to do now in order to make a lap counter, and that is to simply add times player.name laps equals times player.name lap, so itself plus 1. So all we are doing here is add a 1 to the current lap count. Pretty simple, right? But now you might see with other models and with the timing, with my other timing system, that there should be a lap count up here where the player list is. that's not the case. So what I've done now, all I've done now is basically start with a groundwork for how I'm going to be adding the leaderboard thing, which is going to be a little bit different. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a new function that I'm going to need to see where I'm going to write. Let's write it here at lap count to leaderboard. Let's make that update. So I want to make a function that basically updates a lap count to a new value every time it requests. So update lap count, and we want to update the lap count of a particular player, and we want to new lap count. We want to do this. We're going to leave this empty for now because first we need to actually make a lap count visible to the player, and that can be done by a little bit of a different method. So I'm going to create a section here, create leader stats. I'm going to call it leader stats, and this is basically how you make a leader stat appear. And with the leader stats, I mean on the top right you've got the player list, and then you can add leader stats like extra columns, if you will, on the top right, where you can see the lap count, for example, and later the corner cuts as well. So we are going to get going with that right now. We are going to create a... This actually needs to be created, I'm doing this completely wrong, every time a player joins, so that happens over here. Let's create a new function for that as well. Let's call it create leader stat, and then create leader stats for the player. Just player, we don't need anything else. And we are going to call it when the player first joins the game. So create leader stats player. We're going to call it here. So now we move on to this section here. And what we want to do is we want to create add a number value or an int value to the player, and we're going to call it. So we're going to add an int value, and we're going to place it inside the player. This is how Roblox recognizes a leader stat in the first place. So it might not make too much sense now, but bear with me, this is going to make much more sense in a second. And we want to call this new instance we just created leader stats. Then we want to create a leader stat for the lap counter. So laps equals instance.new. I'm going to insert another int value, which is a whole number, which is a value that can store a whole number. And we want to insert inside the leader stats value. So we want its parent to be this. And then we want to rename our new thing to laps, and we want to do the same for corner cuts. So let's do that very quickly. Corner cuts, and we also want its parent to be leader stats. So that should do the trick for us, pretty much. That should make it so that we can see a number. Yeah, there we go. We can now see that we have two columns added. We've got the laps added, and we've got the corner cuts added. I'm going to first do this section, then I'll check the chat for any questions. Let's finish this thing real quickly. So now what we want to do is we want that number that we saw on the top right to update every time someone does a lap. And that can be done very quickly and very easily. Let's find the function. This is the wrong script. We need to go to our server script here. And what we want to do is we want to update we want to find our leader stats, which we do a player dot leader stats dot laps dot value, and we change that to new lap count. Well, that's pretty much all you have to do, but there is a catch to this, which can sometimes happen in real gameplay, which can happen at times. Sometimes it may happen that someone crosses the line or their lap count gets updated. For example, when when the server resets everyone's lap time, now this thing gets triggered while the play is still loading in the game. So while there may be a player but no leader stats yet, that this thing is yet to be processed. That has happened in real life before or in actual gameplay before. So what we need to do is we need to add a few checks here. So we want to make sure that leader stats has been created before we proceed with this section, because otherwise this is going to give an error and that's going to break our script. So we want to check if the leader stats do exist, which you can do by simply writing this. You could write this, but that's not really necessary. Just keep in mind that this, in our case, means if the leader stats exists inside the player. And then moving on, if that exists, we can check if player.leaderStats, so assuming that they, now knowing that they exist, check if the laps object exists as well. Then what we will do is put this inside this if statement and then close it, so that means that this only gets triggered, gets access once we're sure that those values actually exist. So that should be all that we need to do. All we have to do now is actually make sure that this function is being used, but every time someone does a lap, which can be done right over here, and then we go to this section and we add this here. We're going to paste this here. It's going to update the lap count to whatever its current value is. Easy enough. So now we're going to test this very quickly to see if this actually works, make sure that it works. So we're going to do a lap right now. Go from sector 2 to sector 3. There we go, our lap count is being updated. Let's do another lap to make sure that it counts upwards and doesn't, for example, stay at 1, you never know. There we go, it updates our lap count. Beautiful. So, let me have a look at the chat right now. Let's see, question, how do you code the fastest lap information thing in the game? Maybe I can somehow give a quick explanation with this system, because the system I use in the game is different from this. But basically what I would do is I would, once someone registers a lap time, it would also check in a way if that person has set the fastest time overall. So we already have a check here for whomever has the fastest lap, or if the person has set a new personal best, that already is happening here. But you can also expand it so it also checks if the player has the fastest lap out of everyone, if it's a new fastest lap. And then if that's the case, it's going to send a signal to all the players, and then in the local script somewhere, then an animation will start to play that where there's a notification that someone has set a fastest lap of the race. Okay, Wesley, someone apparently wants your lap time code right now. Dumb question, but can you send a copy of your code? I will publish this model at the end of this live stream when this live stream has over. So if you want this code, if you want to use this timer, feel free to do so. I will publish it after this video. There's already a model of this timing system already available. The link is in the description, but it will be updated after this live stream has finished. Okay, moving on. We've got our lap counter, which is great. But now we also want a corner cut system, because right now we can walk around the track Actually, let me not hit play for that. I can just explain like so. We can just walk around the track, cut this thing off, just hit the 3 sectors, and set a really ridiculous fast lap time. That's not exactly what we want to do. So what we want to do is we want to place a couple of trigger parts. So let me copy this. Let's make it red, which is not something you have to do. Its name is going to be imported. Let's call this corner cut. Let's place it. I'm not going to do it at a lot of places. Let's put one here. Let's put one here. I'm not going to be really precise with those placements. Let's do it very quickly, like so. But you can't just cut corners. Yes, this is good. Just a really quick example. So these red boys, they are. The idea is if the player walks through or touches those red things, the red parts, that their lap will be invalidated. Another question: are lap times in time trials stored in a different way? Yes, but I think you mean having those lap times actually saved. So once you rejoin another time, your lap time still be there. Yeah, that requires data storing, and that is a little bit more complicated than what we're doing today. I may do a video on data storing in the future. It's a whole different beast. It's actually not that hard, I guess, once you get how it works and you know what its limitations are, because there are some caveats to data storing. But yeah, it's certainly something I could make a video on in the future, because since data storing is pretty useful for other things as well. Anyway, back to the script. We want our player to be punished if it dares to cut corners around the track. So let's go to this function over here. We go to our local script where our player interaction is being measured effectively. And let's go to this function here. If you remember from the previous parts, this function triggers whenever the player hits something. And then what this function does, it checks if the player has happened to hit a particular part. For example, the start part, the sector part, the sector 1 part, the sector 2 part. Now we want to add an extra part to this little list of parts that our player can interact with, or that will have an effect in the script. And that will be, of course, our corner cutting part, which we can simply do by writing this here. Although you might see this red line under this, and that's because we haven't created a lap valid variable yet. So I'm going to create this new variable called lap valid, which basically indicates whether your lap is still valid or not. It's self-explanatory, and we want this value to be false, or I mean true, as soon as we start a new lap. So let's find the section where we start a new lap. Lap valid equals true, and then what we want to do is we want it to be false whenever we hit a corner cutting trigger. So let's put this print thingy here. And let's actually test this quickly. So every time we cut a corner, we want to see that our script has registered that, and that the thing has turned to false. So I'm going to go through this wall here, and you see nothing, which is not supposed to happen. It's because I called those parts differently. I call them corner cut rather than CC. So if we change this to corner cuts, it should now work. So that's a mistake on my part. Wasn't really my intention. Let's call this the way it's supposed to be called, and let's try to walk through this again. And as you can see, it tells us off for corner cutting. It also says sector 1, but that's more because you can ignore that. This triggers every time you go through a part. We can actually remove this bit now, as we don't really need it. We don't need this print either, so we can remove that as well. But we know now that the script registers corner cuts now. And now what we want to do is we want to tell the server whenever we set a lap time if the lap should be valid or not. So how are we going to do that? So we want to send an extra attachment when we send a message to the server that the player has set a lap time. We want to add an attachment, which we can do by adding a second argument here, which you can do by putting a comma and then another value like true, false, or a variable. So our variable in this case would be lap valid, and this will be passed on to the server as well. And then we need to be able to have the server script receives this message the right way, which we can simply do by applying a third argument here, which we call lap valid. You can give it any name you want, but let's keep some consistency going. Let's call this lap valid as well. You can also call it is valid or counts, lap counts, something like that. You can name it whatever you want. So what we want to do is we don't completely want to invalidate someone's lap time. We still want the player to have his lap count. We still want his lap to count, because otherwise if you can't cut your lap, you immediately lap behind in a race, for example. You don't want that. You also want the time to still be registered, but maybe with another color, but we need to change that as well. But the main thing is, we don't want the player's best time to be updated, which we are going to do now. So all we need to do is we make sure that this thing doesn't happen, which we can simply prevent by making sure that this section doesn't pass. Under normal circumstances, when we've done a proper lap, this would pass if we set a new PB, but we want to add a second condition to that. And that second condition is, of course, if our lap is valid, like so. And then we want to write an add, and then we should be done, except that we aren't, because we have to add a few brackets. Why is that? Something like how the script reads this, how the programming language reads this bit. If we were to leave out the brackets, it would read it as such, like it would read it as if the lap is valid and your time is better than your best time, or if you haven't set a lap time yet, what happens then is this thing will still work if your lap isn't valid, but you haven't had a fast lap yet. So in order to make sure that this line is being read correctly by the program, we want to add those two brackets. So let's test again. Let's see if this thing is working now. Go into Studio. Let's do a normal lap first. Actually, let's do a cheeky corner cut lap. Our lap should be invalidated now. We need to add some feedback. Give the player some feedback that his lap has been invalidated. Let's run back to the line. We can see that despite our efforts, our lap is still valid. I need to check why that is the case. Interesting. That our lap is valid despite our efforts to invalidate our lap. Let's do one more lap. Let's see if we can improve. I'm running through the triggers, but yet it doesn't work. Why is that? Should be the case that this is true, but I'm not sure why. Let me actually make sure that the value pass that is being passed through here actually adds up. That it is. Wait, I need to do this. Let's do it like this, and then check what is our issue. If whether it also the server always gets a true value or not, because I'm pretty sure that our local script does detect corner cuts now. It's just whatever, making sure that it sends the right message to the server. That's an issue. I'm trying to do something that doesn't work, which is putting a bool with combining a bool with a string. So if we change that quickly, so that the print actually works, then we can see what is being passed to the server at all times. So let's do a quick lap. Just corner cut, because we don't care. Go back to the line. We see it's being passed false, yet it still applies the best lap time to the local thing. Let's check what's going on there, because this shouldn't be working. I can imagine that. Okay, cool. Because our local script has a separate system for separate best lap time indicator. So let's change that quickly by adding lap valid as well right here. So we're going to do the same thing as we just did on the server, except that we need to do it for this local script as well, which I didn't realize at first. Let's test this again to make sure that it works right now. We're going to do a let's do a corner cut nap first. Let's do a cheeky corner cut lap first. Just walk through here and go back to the line, and we see our best lap time hasn't updated, and that can also be seen right here, where our lap time is still 0. Now let's do a normal lap where we don't corner cut. So let's pass through this sector. Our lap should still be valid at this point. There's no corner cut figures here, so I can cut this corner off a little bit. Go back to the finish line. Let's cut this as well because there's no trigger there. Let's exploit that. And now our best lap time has been updated. Let's do another valid lap, or I say valid because, yeah, I've just been really sloppy with the corner cutting triggers, but that makes my life a bit easier so I can do a bit quicker lap times. Let's go back. It has updated. Let's do a corner cut lap now. Just cutting corners, cutting corners, cutting corners, cutting corners. There we go. We see that our last time was an improvement, but because our lap is invalid, our best lap time doesn't get updated, and the same happens with this leaderboard here as well. Excellent. Now what we want to do is we want to give the player more feedback that his lap has been invalidated, because right now you don't get a clear message that your lap time has been invalidated. I know my lap time has been invalidated because I'm literally running through a those visible triggers, but in a normal game they should be invisible, so that way the player can't tell until they complete their lap whether their lap time was valid or not. So we want to change that. We want to change that by going, let's see, we want whether we touch the corner cut thing to have a message pop up with the message that your lap has been invalidated. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to create another text label. I'm going to call it CC. I'm going to give it more or less the same properties as our existing pop-up element, which looks, actually you can't see it, so let me duplicate this quickly. Let me put it here. Yeah, you can see our new thing over there, but that's not its correct position. Let's move it here. We want to essentially give it the same properties as our existing pop-up. Actually, I have a better idea than doing a corner cut pop-up. What I'm going to do is, whenever we corner cut, that this just disappears. It doesn't count anymore. So what we're going to do here, this thing should show whenever we have our whenever we set our, or how deep we are into the lap in terms of time. That's what this bit does, and this bit gets updated quite frequently. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to add lap valid section here. So we're going to only update this if our lap is valid. So what should happen now if I jump back into the game and try to do a lap is we go here, we go through here, and something weird is going on, and that's because I've got that's because I've been editing the right script, right? Yeah, I have. I just need to get rid of this thing here. There we go. But our timer should not be progressing anymore once we go through here. Yeah, you can see that it has stopped now because we've cut the corner. But this doesn't look right exactly because our timer just stops dead, and it looks a bit weird that we are still in a 1.47. But if we go through the line, it does display the right lap time, so it's not like we suddenly do a 1 second 0.4 or whatever it just displayed. It's just that our display, our stopwatch gets paused effectively. But what I want to do instead is I want our frame display to be just stopped dead in its tracks. So I want this display to become this beautiful thing here. I also want to achieve that by going to our yes, timekeeper current. I want this to become empty. There we go. Then we go back here. And then we go through this wall, and there we see our lap has been invalidated because it doesn't show what lap we're on anymore. So that is our indication. That will be our indication, so we can tell that our lap is no longer valid. I'm going to get rid of that thing over there in a second. And as you just saw, whenever we start a new lap, it just starts counting again from the beginning, as it should. Let me get rid of this thing here because we don't need it anymore. Now what we want to do is I want this pop-up thing to become red, give it a red color whenever someone posts an invalid lap time. So we can do that by going to the section that triggers this pop-up here. And I need to find the right function for that. Pop-up time, this should be the right one. This is the section where whenever someone sets a lap time, gets shown here. So what we want to do is we want to add a third variable because this function is being passed from the server to the player. Yeah, this is being passed from the server to the player, so the server has to let the script on the player side know that whether the lap is valid or not. So we know, our local script knows whether to display the lap time in red or in black in the normal color, with the normal color scheme. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to add an if statement. We're going to check if the lap is valid, then our pop-up dot background color becomes black, which you can do by writing color3.new and then 3 zeros, which equals black. Then what we want to do is if our lap is not valid, so if this isn't the case, if this is false, then we want our pop-up to become red, and we can do that by writing, let's do 0.2, and you can also see in this preview display that we're going to get a red lap time. Let's do 2 for a little bit of clarity. So let's test this again. I'm getting a question, is this the new time and corner cutting system? Yes, I guess you can say that, although this is more of an alternative timing system to the one that's currently public. This one will be public as well, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be better than the one that's currently available. It's just that it's an alternative. And as you can see right here, you can see that we set an invalid lap time, which we can also do here by making this color red rather than yellow. We can also change that. And that's, so we go to the server side of things. Actually, it's always red because I forgot to do something. I forgot to apply this to the server side. I forgot because now the server doesn't send this bit, so this thing is always going to be false, which means this gets always triggered. So to make sure that doesn't happen, we need to go to the server script and find the bit where, which I think is this one. Where the server sends the data back to the players, where the players get notified that, hey, this player set a new lap time. So we're going to do that now. Let's start off by setting a valid lap time. So I'm going to cut through here, avoid getting a corner cut, which sounds a bit weird. I also realized I forgot to do this bit here, which we'll get to in a second. As you can see right now, we managed to set a valid lap time, so this display is the display is black. But once we complete another lap time, now it's an invalid lap time, it is displayed in red. But as you may notice here, our corner cut is still, our counter is at 0, and that's because we haven't implemented anything yet. So what we want to do is we want to go to the server side of things. Let's find the right spot for that. Let's create a new function, which we call function at corner cut player, which is going to be, going to basically copy and paste this bit because this bit is going to be similar to what we had before. Corner cuts. So basically, instead of updating our lap count, we're going to update our corner cuts count, and we're going to do that by simply writing this. And then we want this to be triggered, this function to be triggered every time the player cuts a corner. So what we're going to do is we need to add a new remote event up here. And if you don't know what a remote event is, if you haven't watched the previous videos or forgot what those up were, those events are basically the tunnels between the server and the player. So the player can't just, a player script, a local script can't just do whatever they want to the server, because that would make exploiting possible, which is already possible to some degree. But I'm going a bit off topic now. Anyway, if you want a player to communicate with the server, so if you want to let the server know, for example, hey, I set a new lap time, then it has to go through a certain tunnel. You can communicate that to the server in a specific manner. And that's what remote events are for. So in the previous episodes, we already defined remote events for whenever someone sets a lap time and when someone has set a lap time. And now we want one for corner cuts. So we want the player to let the server know that they have cut a corner, so the server can update their lap count. You can't do this locally because that if you try to go here and try to do this script bit in a local server, then other players aren't going to see that effect. Only you are going to get to see that effect. That's why you have to do this through the server rather than through the local script. You can't do this through the local script because it won't be visible to the other players. So now we start adding a new remote event, which we call which we're going to give a name shortly, but we're going to put it on the replicated storage because that's where we place our remote events. Corner cut event dot, we need to give the name equals corner cut event, just plain simple corner cut event. Now what we want to do is we want to go to the timer script, and we want our timer script to know that this thing exists, or we want an easy reference to the corner cut event we just created. So every time a player joins, so every time this script gets enabled for the first time, it's going to look for that event we just created. which it does here. So now it knows that it exists. It has it does have a definition for the corner cut event, and now we can make use of it to send a signal to the server. So let's do that. Let's go here and simply add corner cut event via server. And we don't have to pass any arguments, because the argument basically is, the signal basically is, hey, I just cut a corner. And then we go back to the server side. We aren't done yet, because we have to make sure that this function gets triggered whenever someone corner cuts. So we go down here and we add corner cut event on server event. We want to add a connection, or basically a trigger, that whenever something is sent to through the corner cut event tunnel we created, that our add corner cut function gets triggered, like so. So now we're going to test this, and I know this isn't going to work perfectly, but you're going to see that we managed to do something here. So we're going to cut this corner, and as you can see, the counter went up by 1. I cut a corner. And I cut 2 corners apparently, and that's our little issue going on, because what happens when we go through this wall is it detects 2 touches. Like if we were to do this, it would count multiple cuts at once, and we don't really want that to happen. So what we want to do in order to prevent this from happening, there's a name for this, I just forgot it. There's a term for this happening, this spiking, if you will, that it detects more corner cuts than intended. Debouncing, that's the word I was looking for. So to prevent that from happening, we need to add a second check. We want to make it so that when we just did a corner cut, we can't add another corner cut to the counter for the next second or half a second or something like that. Just so that we don't get multiple counts on accident. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a CC cooldown, which we put at 0. No, let's call it last CC at, because what I want this server to this thing to do is I want this value to be the time at which the last corner cut was being made. So I'm going to go back here, and I want to do this check that if time, which is the time we are at now, or let's actually do this, current time equals time. So this is our current time, the moment when we hit our corner cut trigger. And what we want to do is we want to check if that current time is at least half a second later than the last time we hit, last time we cut a corner, which would be 0.5. So what this thing does, our current time is always larger than last CC at. So imagine we did a corner cut at 10 seconds. So that means our last corner cut was at that time was at 10 seconds, and we hit it again at 11 seconds. Then this 11 minus 10 would be 1, which is greater than 0.5. Yet this bit passes. Yet we go through this bit here. The lap valid thing, we can keep it here because it doesn't really matter. It turns false, and if it's already false, then it just turns false again. That doesn't really matter, so we can just leave that outside this if statement. But what we want to do is make it so that when we do hit a corner cut trigger, that it updates when we hit the trigger for the last time. So let's make this 2 for a bit, just as a clear example. Like, you can't get to corner cut counts within 2 seconds. Let's make it that. So we're going through here, we wait 2 seconds, we go back through here, we get another counter. Let's not wait 2 seconds, and you see it doesn't really count until 2 seconds have passed. Beautiful. Now we don't have to worry about that anymore. Okay, so let's find. I'm going to find the bit where I just changed. Sorry, I forgot where I did that. Let's change it to 1. Let's do 1.5. That's fine. We're going to leave it at that. Okay, so there's one more thing I want to do in this video before I move on to any questions or any requests that I could do. Things I could quickly show off in this video if the time allows me to. Before we carry on any further, I just heard something, not sure what. I'm just going to ignore that. Anyway, what we want to do is we wanted our lap time to be in red as well when it's being displayed on the server. So I need to first look for the bit that does that for us. The section where it displays the lap time. Here it says sort of times. Let me think for a second. Sort times converter, sort times. It just refreshes, it creates everything here. Okay, I need to add one extra check here. Which is this bit here. So this basically check if this check is supposed to be there if our last step is valid. So what I want to do in order to be able to implement this here is that I want to add another check. Let's see, where did I check that? Let's place this here. If lap, basically all I have to do is times player.name and then lap valid equals lap valid. So this is going to be true if our last lap time was valid, and this is going to be false if our last lap time was invalid. Easy enough. Then we move on to this bit here. And then what we want to do is we want to change our last lap color. Last lap dot background color 3 equals, and we want to change that to red if our lap happens to be invalid and yellow if it is valid. So we can do that here. We can just check if our position is correct. Not position, we need to check what color we had given it previously. So color 3 from RGB, which means we use 0 to 255 scaling rather than the 0 to 1, which happens when you use the .new variant. Then this is white because this ranges from 0 to 1, but if you use it from RGB, it ranges from 0 to 255, which is what I, in most cases, prefer to use. What we want to do is we want to check if item lap valid. So if the lap is valid, then the color will be yellow, and else our color will be red. So we can do that by making this 255. That makes it white. Then wait, we need to increase this bit here. Let's make this 200. That's not white enough. Let's make this 150 and 150. That should make it somewhat red. That should be clear enough. And then we go back to the server. Once again, if you've got any questions about this video, feel free to ask in the chat. Okay, let's do a clean lap first. Do a quick lap. Go back to the start finish line, and we see the thing is yellow. Then we do another lap where this time we actually cut a corner. Whoops, we cut the corner, our lap is invalid. Oh boy, that's bad. That's really sad. Then we cross the line again, and then our thing is still yellow. Okay, what's going on here? What is going on here? Because I think I did everything right, but apparently not. What is our... I need to check this sort times thing here. Because I know what happens is it takes this and it throws it to a mixer. It converts it to a different data structure effectively. Yeah, it does here. It doesn't. Yeah, this doesn't convert. So let's add laps in. Laps equals item laps. If you remember from last time, what we did here was we converted our old data structure, which was which just had the names of everyone, to a data structure which is sorted. What we need to do is we need to manually add in the rest of the arguments. So we're going to add this here to the timing module. Then we hit play again, and now our program should work as intended. So let's have our lap invalidate again, which we just managed to do right here. Then go through this bit. They go back to the start finish line, and it's still yellow for whatever reason. What did I do wrong this time? Let's see. Lap valid should be true. Lap valid, item lap valid. That should be correct. Lap valid, it always changes here to whatever it should be. Lap valid equals item lap valid. Apparently this doesn't return the right value. It's always valid for whatever reason. If item lap valid. Okay, cool. Let's find out what's going wrong, because I'm pretty sure this should be the trick. Okay, let's do a quick lap. Let's do a corner cut lap. False. Okay, that's false. Yet what happens here? It keeps the same color unless I changed the wrong. I know what happens. I know what I did wrong. It doesn't change the color from yellow because I changed the background color instead of the text color. So let's fix that by writing text color 3 rather than background color 3. Background color doesn't matter because it's invisible. We needed to change our text color rather than the background color. So that's my bad. Let's do another lap again now, another invalid one. Because we don't like our character to stay on the track. Then we go back to the start finish line, and now it's in red. There we go. Now you can see that our last lap was invalidated, and that it is on the board, so that it's for everything else, from everyone else to see. It's on display. We also have this thing over here, yet it displays a different... It doesn't display the red here, which we need to change as well in a second. Not sure why it doesn't... I need to check why it carries over to this thing as well. There we go, across the line again. Now we did a valid lap time, so it should be yellow. Let's go back to our script. Let's see what went wrong. Oh yeah, because it's handled by the local script, I'm pretty sure, rather than... Yeah, this is a little bit... This is arguably poor programming on my end, that you have to do certain things twice. So all we have to do now is we have to add this thing here, because this item that valid, it's the same. It's from the same data structure, same piece of data as this function uses. So that should be straightforward. So we can test again. Like right now, it's already red apparently because our lamp wasn't valid to begin with. I know why, because Our lap was false. There we go, it's red now. Let's do a proper lap time now. Let's not cut corners this time. And we set a valid lap time, and that means this is yellow as well. Good. Except that I don't want this thing to be red at first, and that can be solved quite easily. Because when the player first joins, there is no such thing as the lap invalid key. There's no lap invalid property, it's something I need to add right here. I also didn't add corner cuts. Actually, I don't really have to. Well, I can, but I don't think it's necessary. You could always add it here, just like I did with the lap count, because you may want to use it for different purposes if you want to expand this thing in the future. Lap valid, that should be true rather than 0, because we will either want it to be true or false. We don't want it to be a number. Let's go back. There, now it's yellow. Good. We can make sure to check if it's going to be invalidated once we cross the line again. There we go. It's red now, and so it is right here. Cool. Okay, so we are done with what we wanted to do in this video. We added a lap counter and we added a corner cut counter. So that's it for this video. One more thing I want to check before I round things off is, did I implement a reset feature before? No, I didn't. Well, I said there was going to be the last part. Maybe the next part, if you want to see that, could be a way to reset the lap times, because currently the timer doesn't do that. There's no such thing as a reset button. So that's something that I could be doing for the next video, because I don't think I'm going to be able to implement that in this video. So that's going to be that could be a possible part 5 for this tutorial series. Anyway, I'm going to wait for a little bit in case anyone's got any questions about this topic. And then I am going to round off this video and yeah, go stop the stream. And so when I stop the stream, I'm going to make this a model again. Let me do that now actually. Let's create a model right now. So this is green, the start, this is yellow, sector 1, because this one has to be sector 1. Sector 2. And corner cut, which will be red. There we go. Going to put these inside the timer. They actually don't have to be in the timer. That's with the one I've got live right now, the timer that exists right now. This one you don't have to have those triggers be part of this model. So that's a positive about this model over the previous one. There's actually one more thing I could do here quickly. We can actually make it so that you can't do laps when you are walking, that you have to be in the car. You have to be seated if you want your lap to count. So we can do that very simply by adding if player.character.humanoid, so the humanoid of the character, .sit. Then we do this bit, and if that's not the case, so if our character isn't seated, then we can return and not do anything here. And we can test that quickly by going in game. Let's do that quickly. You can see the script doesn't work because I'm not in the car. Let's insert a car very quickly, just as a quick demonstration. Let's just type car, and the car, I don't care what, let's do this thing here. The first thing that pops up, this Lambo. Let's hit play again. This model's probably going to have a chassis. I'm not sure what this Lambo. I forgot that my character. Oh, it's got this fancy startup. Well, the UI overlaps. This is a chassis. Makes a very loud noise. Luckily I've got sound off. But we can start to drive, and because we are in the car right now and this Lambo is very loud, you can't hear it, but it's very loud. Because we are in a car, or put it differently, because we are seated in a car, this thing works. It updates, and this Lambo is very hard to control, might I add that. But yeah, we go across the line and we set a lap time. We can do another lap with this thing, this time an invalid one. This thing is pretty slippery, slidey. Let's go across the line again and we set an invalid lap time. And if you look here, we can see our lap time is red. Anyway, that is this tutorial. That concludes this part of this tutorial. I thought it was going to be the last part, but I realized there's more I could do to this that I could probably do in a future part of this. Maybe in a year from now I could make part 5. But anyway, we'll see what happens. Maybe sooner, maybe later, I don't know, or maybe never, who knows. If you want to see part 5, let me know. Anyway, thank you for watching this live stream. I hope you have learned a thing or two about scripting. And yeah, I'll see you in a future video. Have a nice